Hi, I'm Steve Mann and this is Paper Classroom. Welcome to the first of our video tutorials, and in this particular tutorial I'm just going to go through the learning outcomes, what we expect you to be able to know and to do by the end of this history module. So there are 5 learning outcomes, 5 areas of knowledge that you need to be competent with by the time you have finished this module. What are these learning outcomes? Well, there's the expansion of papermaking. You need to know where papermaking started and how it spread across the world and why it spread the way in which it did. You need to know about the changes in raw materials. What did they used to use when they first started making papermaking? What do they use today? What's happened in the transitional period and why did it happen? You need to know about the processing of those raw materials. In the beginning it was very crude, today it's very technical. So you need to understand the transition from the old technology to the new technology. And you need to understand about the evolution of sheet formation. In the beginning, they were essentially dunking a sieve in a tub of fibres. Now we're squirting a stream of fibres at more than 60 miles an hour onto a continuous belt. So there's been a magnificent change in technology. And finally, we need to know a little about the applications of paper. In the beginning, the idea of producing paper was simply to have a recording material, something on which to make records of what has happened. Today we have a myriad of uses and we'll see those as we go through this tutorial. So the first thing we need to know is about the expansion of papermaking. Where did it start? Why did it change? How did it change? Well, it did start here in China. The gentleman who is reputed to be the founder of papermaking or the father of papermaking was a guy called Ceylon, so we'll learn a little bit about him in the future. The Chinese did try to keep it as a secret. It moved east a little bit towards Japan, but mainly the spread of papermaking was westward. So how did it spread westward and why did it spread westward? We'll learn that. Then we need to know about the raw materials. As you can imagine, 2,000 years ago, they were probably using different things than they're using today. So when Ceylon started off his papermaking, he was using this as one of the main components of his furnish. The bark from the paper mulberry tree. He used other things as well. Silk offcuts, discarded fishing ropes, bits of bamboo. Later on, we started to use trees for many years. That is the essential raw material for papermaking. Now, of course, we're very concerned with the environment, and so recycled fibre is becoming more and more of a valued raw material. Papermaking doesn't just include fibres, there's all the chemicals that we put in the paper, and we'll learn about those in the water and chemical additives module. But for now, we'll just mention that one of the first chemicals that was also used by the Chinese, and they were using starch. Their source of starch was from rice, because that was their staple diet. There was plenty of rice around. It was freely available. It was relatively cheap. Today, we still use starch. Hundreds of thousands, millions of tons. Of course, we don't grow as much rice now in the West as the Chinese did in those days. We have our own sources of starch. We have wheat, we have potato, and we have corn. And you can see here corn husks and the starch that's extracted from those corn husks. Then we need to know about the processing, particularly of the fibres. As you can imagine, that may have changed radically. In the beginning, the Chinese were using a mortar and pestle to grind the fibres down into individual components. Then the Arabs later on invented what we call the stamp mill. Those large wooden hammers are connected to a camshaft. The camshaft is driven by a water wheel. How that's changed. When papermaking came to Europe, the Germans modified probably something like wheat grinding material to grind the fibres. This is known as a collar gang. As things developed further, we developed the Hollander beater, obviously developed in the Netherlands. And then finally, we developed refiners. And there are many different types of refiner that we need to talk about. Conical refiners, disc refiners. So you'll see about that. The fourth learning outcome is you need to know about sheet formation. How was the sheet formed originally? How is it formed today? And what sorts of transitional equipment did it go through? This picture here illustrates how papermaking was done 100 AD, 105 AD. They had a tub of a fibre slurry. They dipped into it, effectively, a sieve made of thin slivers of bamboo. The water drained through the sieve, the fibres deposited on the top. The master papermaker would then give that loaded sieve to his assistant. He would go away, take the sheet off the sieve, and bring back a nice clean one for the master papermaker to make sheet number 2. So in those days, all the paper was made one piece at a time. Today, the most common configuration of machine is this one. This is known as the Fourdrinier. And here we will squirt fibres onto this continuous mesh. As it travels along here, water will drain through. This is known as a couche roll. We will then take the sheet off and put it through a drying system. So radically different. But that's not the only change. Why the Fourdrinier machine was being developed down at Frogmore Paper Mill. On the plot next door to the people who were doing that was another gentleman by the name of Dickinson, and he was inventing the vat machine. So rather than a very long continuous wire where you were squirting fibre onto the surface, here you've got a round vat machine, and the water and the fibres are sucked through the wire. The water goes through, the fibres are deposited on the outside, and away it goes. Finally, we need to talk about the applications. What do we use paper for? As I said in the beginning, the main use of paper was for recording everything that had gone on at court, and maybe letter writing, so to transfer information or to transmit information. These days, paper has a myriad of uses, as you see there, packaging. So high value products like perfumes, like alcohol, like medicines, cigarette paper. So the paper itself is essential to the cigarette. The cardboard boxes, so general sort of low quality packaging. Even suitcases. The old fashioned suitcases were made out of highly impregnated sheets. Then we got onto modern suitcases made of plastic and metal, and now there's a trend back to making suitcases from paper again. Then we've got tea bags. And tea bags are really essentially a filtration medium. So there's lots of other versions of that. There's coffee filters, there's laboratory filter papers, there's air filters in cars, there are vacuum filters, not so common these days. And then finally, you've got the very high-end uses of paper. So here we've got a pregnancy testing kit. But paper is also the best material for storing DNA, for example. And finally, of course, money. In the West, there's a trend away from paper money now over to plastic money, but money is still essentially made from paper in the vast majority of countries. So that really takes care of the 5 learning outcomes. Thank you for watching this introductory video, and please enjoy the rest of our videos. Thank you very much.